and technology. My name is Guthrie. I am here with Susan. Hey, Susan.
Hi, Guthrie. How are you?
I am doing pretty well. I'm doing pretty well. Um, so this is going to be our third try with new audio setups. So
Yeah.
I think we're honing in here.
You think
I
we
got a new
may
mic.
we will at least have an improvement?
Oh man, I certainly hope so. I have a new mic. You have a new mic. We're dialing in on the settings.
Yeah.
So I really think we're going to get there.
All right.
This is my hope. And of course, watch like this one. Like we're both like blown out the entire time, but it sounds like.
I hope not.
Okay.
Uh,
Shall we get to today's topic?
yeah.
Okay, so today's topic is another. It's sort of a futury topic. It is both future and ancient at the same time. That sort of fantastic mystical combination.
Okay.
It's like the Mayan calendar. Like it's ancient, but it's also about the future. Remember the Mayan calendar with the 12,000 years and like the end of the cycle.
Not really.
That was like a big deal a couple years ago. Anyways, today's topic is designing for physical space versus designing for digital space.
Is it designing for physical and digital together?
I will let you be
Maybe we
the
can go there. You'll let
judge
me
of that
decide if we're going to
if
go there.
if
Okay.
that's what you want to do.
Okay.
Yeah. So the premise it goes as follows. Before digital space, we were designing for
Physical space, because there was no
yay.
digital space.
Yeah, yeah, you got
Hey,
it.
how am I doing?
You're
I'm
doing
doing
great.
okay
One for
so
one.
far.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, especially since I would say 2000, when the amount of time that we spent in digitals, because before there were digital things, there was radio and TV, but you didn't really have to design for those spaces. People were just were watching TV like they were watching a
Yeah,
window,
the
but they weren't
technology.
really
Yeah,
interacting with with the TV show the way you would interact with a website or
right,
software. So
right.
starting in the 2000s, the amount of design that had to go into digital spaces sort of went off on this trajectory, and that was the future, and the cyberspace and the World Wide Web, and that moved directly into social media, and you had all this money, money in digital products, goods and services. Google, Meta, Apple. I would you say that the what percentage of UXers or designers that will broaden out to the broader design community are employed doing digital work these days
You mean if you look at the total percent
in
of
the US? We'll
people
just say.
in the design
And I
space,
don't
what?
have the answer. This is sort of your sort of
Yeah, I mean,
guess.
I would say,
So even if you work in healthcare, but you're working on a website or a login or health portal, or that all counts as digital.
um, it's definitely large. It's maybe dropping from
Well,
the
no, I just,
height.
well, okay, okay.
I mean, I think I'm. This is a wild guess. I'm gonna say 80% of UX work is done designing the user experience of things in the digital realm.
Okay. So a really,
That's my guess.
really high number.
Really high. Yeah. Hmm.
And that, um, you know, as of what, 30 years ago, that number was like 5%, 10%, 1%, you know?
No, I'm going to totally disagree with what you're saying. So this is interesting. So first
Wow,
of
okay,
all,
40 years ago, 50 years ago, there's
no,
some
no,
num
no, no.
some
Yeah,
number.
but I have a little different view of the, because I didn't stop you when you made your first statement,
Uh-huh.
which was, a switch in the early 2000s. Um, because I wanted to, because I didn't want to interrupt you yet. But um, if we go back to the 1980s and the 1990s, there was a lot of work in the digital space, but it was only at work. Okay, so
Oh, I see.
because the first digital design of computer software was occurring. Yeah, I mean, the whole field of UX, which wasn't called UX back then, but the whole field of how do you design software so that it is easy to use, that was going on in the 80s and the 90s, but it would have been mainly going on at work because you
Well,
had,
hold on, because I'm not
yeah,
talking about no. Now we're getting if we're going back in the day, we have to go back in the day, and it's not just UX. You also have to include all the people who are doing ergonomics, all the people who are doing like physical
yeah,
sort of
and there were,
design.
okay, yes, there were a lot of people doing human factors work.
Yeah,
That goes back to like the 1940s. No, there weren't a lot. There were a few people doing human factors work in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. Um,
but there were a lot
in
of
the
people doing physical product design.
there were not as many as are now doing UX in general, but there were people
Yes,
doing that work for
yes.
sure. And then in the 80s and 90s, so if we looked at, okay, I see what you're saying. So if we look at the percentage of people doing digital design who were in the field of design in general,
Well, I'm just
probably,
open it up to what we're calling the broader design community.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that,
I would, yeah,
who does that
so it
include and
was
not
very
include?
small. So let's say 20% of the people in the 1980s and 1990s that were doing design were doing digital design.
In your defense, uh, there were a lot of programs that were happening. There was, there was sort of writing software you could do on computers, and there
There
were,
was a lot of
know,
spreadsheet stuff. There was a
spreadsheet
lot of
stuff,
business,
business things.
database, data analysis. I mean, that's what
Was
was.
any design actually going through that, or was it just raw coding? I mean, I know when you code
No, no, no. There was design.
software
So
back on like,
no, there was design. I mean,
was it Power PC stuff?
look, the course, the first usability course I ever taught.
Also not fair because you were so ahead of the field.
Well, no, but it was, I mean, yes. So there weren't a lot of people doing this, but there were some. And it was called How to, I got to remember, How to Design Effective CRT Screens.
Yeah.
But there were programmers who took the course. So there weren't UX specialists. There were a handful of UX
And by
specialists.
screens, you mean, I mean, and how to display data on
Yeah,
the
how to
screen.
display data,
Because
and
there weren't
and There were not
GUIs at
GUIs.
this time,
These were
right? No.
CHUIs,
Chewies, yes.
character user
Yes.
interfaces, CHUIs.
So I guess you're right. There is some design that needs to go into even in a very simple. I mean, think of a chewy, old, you know, four
Well,
thousand
these were
dollar
and these were
personal computer.
complicated screens. This
Yeah,
was,
there's software and data and
you got to bring
inventory
up the
and
customer record
spreadsheets
and all
and
the
oh yeah, yeah,
orders,
yeah,
and it
yeah.
it was ugly, but actually, in some ways, because you did not have graphical user interface, you had to pay attention to design. It was very overwhelming for the users to have to try and make their way through these screens, and you got the
Professionals, you mean?
menus and all of that. So,
Barely users.
yeah. Anyway, but it was a smaller number, and then of course, you know, digital products increased, and as you said, suddenly, there were all these digital products, and there was social media, and there were websites, and there were, you know, the apps on phones, and then, that's when we saw the explosion of the field of user experience.
Okay, so I guess I will back off a little bit insofar as there was probably more of this work going on um,
Then you imagined.
than I imagined. But if you think about in a there was a time when you worked for the Gillette. corporation.
There was. That was my
Ve
first corporate job.
First corporate job. What percentage of the at that time, of the corporate spend was of the Gillette Corporation at the time was going into, like, digital stuff?
I have no idea. I really
Because it was
don't know.
some. They were a
I
big
assume
company.
there
They
was
had
some, but I
records
can
and
tell
some.
you that all the, I worked in the I was a my official job title was credit and collections correspondent, CCC. So it was my job to find out why Kmart, w- if anybody remembers Kmart, why Kmart was not paying their $1 million invoice for Gillette razor blades. And it was because, by the way, the truck had been hijacked. And you probably don't remember, well, you weren't around back then, but you may not have even known that there was this issue. I don't even know if I want to tell you what decade I'm talking about. There was this issue where, as part of some kind of political statement, people were hijacking double tractor trailer trucks on highways in America. Nobody knows about this. This would happen periodically. There'd be a truck would get hijacked, and it wasn't just to steal the razor blades and resell them. It wasn't like a criminal thing. It was some kind of political statement. I don't even remember, to tell you the truth. Anyway, this would
Marxists
happen.
have beards.
Uh,
If we
and
if we destroy America's capacity
No,
to
no,
have a
no, it
good
wasn't
shape,
no, 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 it wasn't
we'll start the Marxist
political.
revolution.
It wasn't political about the razor
Razor
blades.
blades.
This was a corporate thing. They would
Yeah,
hijack
sure.
corporate trucks.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
this was going on. Anyway,
Boy,
that was my
we've gotten far afield, huh?
okay, I'm gonna come back. So I worked in that department, and the department next to me was bookkeeping.
Right.
And bookkeeping was a very large room. It looked like a big classroom, and there were 60 people, most of them like middle aged women, sitting at desks like in a school. And they had adding machines. So it was really noisy when you walked by there because it was like click, 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 60 people. Well, you don't know. Adding machines made clicking noises because they were not digital. And so they would type in the number and then they'd pull a lever to add.
For the kids out there who don't know, um, you should, the original computers were
Humans.
basically. Well, no, 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 no. The original mechanical computers,
Yeah.
right? There was what was it, Babbage,
Yes.
in England, and they're
Yes.
really cool devices with all these gears and levers and stuff.
Yeah.
And when
Not digital.
you're doing physical logic, so when
Yes.
you press the button or like
And then
pull the lever,
gears would turn and it would give you
depending
an
on
answer.
which the when you type in like 1 plus 1, the 1 would change the gears in a certain way, and the
That's right.
plus would change the, shaft in a certain way, and your plus would 1 would do the other thing, and then you pull it and it go click, 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 click,
So what I'm
and then it
telling
would
you is
spit out
that
the
the
correct
entire
answer.
bookkeeping department for the Gillette Corporation, I worked in headquarters in Boston in a high rise, was all being done manually. And I'll
Yeah.
tell you one more thing which was when in my job when we had to go investigate why a particular invoice wasn't being paid and what was the invoice and what items were on it. We went literally to a few floors up from where I worked to the entire floor was called Central Records, and you would go to a desk and you would say, I need to see the K file. Okay. And they would bring you this big box, which was the file of all the customers that were being directly invoiced by Gillette, whose name started with K, because that's where Kmart would be. And you would leaf through the physical paper invoices that had been typed because there were all customer records, all invoices, all sales were not computerized,
Okay. So think of
all manual.
the incredible design that had to go into
It
systems,
it was
physical systems.
it was fun.
So when
So no, no,
we
actually, I want to mention most of the UX work being done originally back then in computer human interaction um, was the digital design of manual processes,
right,
not the redesign of digital processes.
right.
But these were most of the work that was being done were things that had
We're
never been.
digitizing records.
These things had never been. Not only were the records being digitized, but the process, for instance, for creating an invoice and sending it to the customer, it had never been digital. It had been, so we used to talk about, I mean, it was a big, I would say, most of the work that we did as UX professionals in that field back then was helping to design a digital process from a manual process.
So I just want to this is great. Thank you for that context. And we finally
You're
got
welcome.
to where I wanted to get
Sorry it
to.
took so long. I was
I just
having
had to go
fun.
back
I had to
even a
walk
couple
down
further.
memory lane.
Yeah, a couple for decades further.
Yes.
I said what, 30 years, 40 years. I really meant like 60 years.
Stop. It wasn't that long ago. I was not doing
No,
this
no,
work 60
but like I
years
had to
ago.
go even before personal computers to get to like
Yes.
really the
Yes.
where we had a
That's
lot
right.
of physical design.
Right, right, right.
I said that the tech that I was thinking consumer side, but you're
Right,
totally right. But
right.
on the business side,
Yep.
people were working on things. So um, the basically the premise goes like this: there was a tremendous amount of effort, ingenuity, work, money, capital, processes, experimentation done with designing in physical space. That's like just like a thing that I think we as a society took for granted. How well a desk works, how well drawers work, the layout of
Mhm.
an office building,
Mhm.
the installation of lights in a ceiling,
Mhm.
a light switch, a toaster,
Mhm.
the stove, all these things that are maybe probably the complicated things that have just been designed incredibly well, and it took in some cases hundreds of years and thousands of people and all this money and time capital. And so we have been coasting, I think, as a society on all this really good physical design work that happened up through the 60s and 70s. And then what happened is all the best and brightest minds and all the money and all the capital and all the fun, sexy work stopped going to physical design and all went into digital design. And so the last, I mean, yeah, you want to say 40 years, 30 years, 20 years, whatever the line is, there's been this slow progression where we've been hammering out really good, polished digital design. And one could argue if that really has been the case. But certainly, if you look over the grand scheme of a website login compared to, 1998, we have certainly come a long ways as far as sophistication and complicated flows and layouts and like using like playing a video game is just like it's there are a lot of I guess I would say creature comforts that exist that make life easier. Now some of that complication has made things worse, but a lot of it um has allowed more sophisticated things to happen in the digital space. Meanwhile, I think there's been a kind of a stagnation of good design in the physical space. I recall recently, I for my office, I got a new desk, and I assembled it, and it was like well made. It's just like a standing desk with like it's got motors and things and steel and brackets and like it's well made and really well designed, the way they design the the channels for the cable management. There are cutout holes that you're like, why is there a hole here? And then when you're actually running the cables through, sometimes you just need to loop it one time through so that it stays in place. And there was a little hole for that. So someone had done a good job thinking of things and having a really good design in a physical space with physical objects. And that's such a breath of fresh air because I think there's so much mediocre design, copycat design in the physical space that it's fine. It's not that great. It's whatever. or it's basically the same good design that we've been coasting on since the 70s and 80s, like fundamentally a lot of our cables, power switches, all that kind of stuff, it's kind of the same or it's a slight derivative of it. So this all brings me now, of course, to a topic we've talked about before, which is knobs. We've talked about knobs. We've talked about buttons, and the knobs and buttons are now premium. So like if you're in a car, the cheap car now has the all did we a couple years ago it was like, well, the expensive concept car is all it's only screens everywhere, and it's because Tesla put a big screen and everyone's like, we gotta have screens everywhere. And now it's like, actually, no, 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 look at this car, it's got knobs everywhere, it's got buttons, physical buttons. Wow, what a thing. So I do think that there is maybe some companies are realizing that there's an underserved market in designing in physical space. I think there are certainly, when you talk about AR potential for various things or the interaction between digital and physical spaces, there is an appreciation of design in a physical space. So the question for this, is a very long preamble,
A very long introduction. The
very long
question
preamble.
is, we finally got to it. Yeah.
Question is, should should we expect a new renaissance in designing for a physical space? Because I think there's an entire generation of UXers or just the brighter designers who've never, except maybe in college, like once or twice, have never designed a physical product, never worked on an application that was actually designing for a physical process, things in a physical space, people at a desk, a room full of people with little machines and walking around in corridors and stuff. And there are certainly people who are specialists who do, I don't, what's it called? It's not interior design, but, like in an office building, like in the foyer of an office building where like paths and routes and so we're going to put a statue here so that like it directs people around. And there are people who are sort of specialists in that kind of thing. And if you look at like a new development, there'll be like a courtyard with a this, and it's all designed with people in mind so that your routing and views and whatever. But I would say that's not like, that's sort of a niche. um and so the question is, are we losing something? Are there important skills that are really valuable that we took for granted as a society or as a design community that are being lost because a much smaller percentage of people have been designing in physical space for so long, we've sort of forgotten how to do it, or the people who had those skills have sort of retired out of the workforce. And is this a problem?
Wow, that's a complicated question. And I mean, not only did it take us 20 minutes to get to it, it took you like 5 minutes to ask the question. Okay, I'm gonna unpack it a little bit. So first of
Uh-huh.
all, there is, as you've kind of alluded to, a really big body of knowledge around design for physical space. And, what's that called? I mean, in some places it might be called industrial design, in some,
Mhm.
or you might think of it as ergonomics, or you might think of it as human factors design. I don't think I mean, I'm hoping we don't lose the body of knowledge. It's an interesting question. It makes me want to go look up a particular book that I might not have on my shelf anymore, and I can't remember the name of. So now I'm going to have to go
Look at
find
that.
it.
It's been lost. All the knowledge has
No,
been
no,
lost.
I
It's not
worry
on
about
people's
it because
shelves.
the book is like 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like 4 inches thick. Uh, And now I wanna go look up the name, so maybe at some point you should go talk a bunch and I'll go look it up. And it's a great book. I mean, I used to just open it and just leaf through it. It was so entertaining. And it had all these all this knowledge and all these statistics. Okay, so what is the average um, span of a human hand in the palm
It's great.
for men, women, people of different ages, people in Asia versus people in the US. So, because if you're designing something that people are going to grab, and then there's like something big that they have to grab and turn with their whole hand, how wide should it be, right? How big are human hands? I mean, and so that was like one data point, and this book just went on forever. How high can people reach? How much can they move their thumbs or their little finger? I mean, it just went on and on. Hands, arms, head turns. It was great stuff. And you didn't need to have that all memorized, but you needed to have some experience of how to put that into action, like you said, training in school. And you had to know where to go find the information. And there was this one book that was like the book that everybody who did that kind of design would have on their bookshelf. So I think there's a body of knowledge. I hope it doesn't get lost. I hope it's still out there because it was based on a lot of scientific measurement um, of the human body and the way it works. Um, so I don't think the body of knowledge will disappear. I do think you're right. I think there are some programs, some very few bachelors, probably much more master's programs that teach this, or at least teach it a little bit. I'm sure the numbers of people going through those programs is getting small. And I guess, there's a danger that the program, if not enough people enroll, then they'll stop offering that degree. So that probably is somewhat of a danger. Um, I think there is a tendency to, uh, as I think there is even in the digital design world, to, okay, well, no, because of our supply chain, we're going to have it built here. And because we're building it here, we're not going to worry about all those things and just build this generic version of it. And don't worry about the human factors aspects of it. And I think that's why we see so many products that you would call, I think, Guthrie, poorly designed from a physical viewpoint. And that's probably going to continue. I think
Well,
that's actually true of the
what's
digital viewpoint as well.
particularly bad, I
Yeah.
find,
Yeah.
and this is I find this very interesting. The worst physical design that I
Yeah.
usually see,
Yeah.
if it's a product that's only physical, it is usually pretty good. Like there are industrial engineers who are doing a good job designing these things. But if it's a fully digital product, it's kind of hit or miss. But it's usually like, I mean, it's usually whatever, okay. Where things get really, really bad is whenever there's a product that has digital design and physical design in the same
So you're
place.
for example, are you
And a
talking about?
phone isn't I'm not really talking about a phone because everyone's just copying Apple and they did a good job the first time. But also there's actually very little physical I know there's a ton, there's literally a ton. There's actually very little design from a physical standpoint of a phone because it's just a slab. Like as if you there's three buttons and you hold it in your hand, you
Okay,
know.
but what?
And
Yeah,
I know you there's the thunder screen
I
and
might disagree with you on that.
but
But
okay,
anyway,
but a better example is
yeah,
something that has a lot more of a physical component,
like
but then
what?
they've added a digital component.
That tell me like what?
Like a refrigerator
I
with a
knew you were
screen with
gonna say
software. Those are
refrigerator.
I know, they're terrible.
No, they
A
are. They're
car is another
terrible.
good one.
Digital refrigerators. They're terrible.
Car software
Car,
interfacing with physical car
digital
stuff,
car
they're
controls.
almost all very bad.
They're
Printer
bad.
software, it like
Printers
which is
bad.
pretty bad.
A
Um
microwave is often bad.
if they actually have a digital design with it. And I'm
Yeah.
not talking to like the not like a very they're not I'm not like the very simple like press the button and it whirs. Not like there's not a digital aspect to it, but where if you had like a screen with menus and layouts and
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um
Washing machines.
if they have a whole
Yes, if
screen.
they have the whole screen thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that seems to be where things are really, really bad, and I've
And that's
noticed this
interesting
trend.
because that's a space that seems to be growing.
Exactly, exactly. Every toasters have a screen, crock pots have a screen,
Yeah.
toilets have a screen, cars have a screen. Everything needs to have a screen, and it all needs to connect. Light switches have a screen,
Well, they should.
thermostats
So
have a
none of these
screen.
things should have screens, in my opinion. But the screen is the, you know,
It's
it's an interesting choice. It's an interesting choice
yeah,
because you can have a digital product that you interact with physically without a screen.
exactly, which is really interesting.
But I think a lot
That's
of
what a
companies.
thermostat is, by the way. Modern thermostat, it's all digital. There's a little chip in there that tells the furnace turn on, turn off.
Yeah, well, my thermostat is is the is the has way too much digital, very poorly designed.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
and
But you could have a thermostat
you
that
could.
was 100% digital,
I know, I've
that the
used
only
them.
input is a knob,
It's wonderful.
and
I
you
was
just turn the
visiting.
knob, and then that's what the temperature is.
I was staying at someone's house and house sitting for their pets not too long ago, and they had one of these new ones, and it was a knob, and it was like so nice. It was like, oh, okay, why can't I have this in my house? Just turn the
Or
knob.
if
You're
you and
done.
people might say, "Well, to save energy, you need a schedule." You could have
No, no,
4
you could put
knobs.
it. Yeah, no, you can put a schedule in, and actually, I also sometimes controlled it with an app on my phone and just pressed a button, and that was fine too. But the whole thing was like so simple. I love just going up and going with the knob. But
So,
yeah,
anyways,
no,
so
yes,
yeah, I think what you said is very important. That there are sometimes you can have a digital product that connects. What's Matter? Is that the home house
yes,
interconnect
mm-hmm,
protocol? That yeah,
mm-hmm,
that has Matter. That's connected to the cloud. That's doing all this complex stuff, and it looks like, and it's just a physical button, right? That the interface is purely analog or purely
yes,
physical, and it's a digital product.
right,
um another way to look at this would be, um switches. You could have a light switch that was completely digital, where you flip the light switch and all that
yeah,
does is it's relaying a radio signal to the
right,
central
right,
hub that turns the light on,
right,
and there's actually no wire between the two,
right,
but it's acting like a switch. So yeah, so it's an important differentiation between things that are operated physically and things that are operated digitally, and things that you interact with physically and things that you
yes,
interact with digitally.
right, right, right. But but so here's an interesting problem or consideration. I mean, it's more expensive to create the knobs.
It's not more. This is where I
That's
agree
what
and
I've been
disagree.
told. Is this not true?
Having knobs
Yeah,
is more expensive,
right.
but creating all the complex screens and flows for the screen is also really expensive.
That's true.
So, it, you know, uh, if the option is one small crappy screen versus a bunch of knobs on a
So,
device,
all
that
right.
it's
So,
maybe cheaper per product, but there's a difference between, a car that has
why?
a
So tell
hundred
me then
knobs.
why? So do we then have all this digital control instead of physical control? Why do we have that if it's not to save money, which is
So
what
okay,
someone told me? Is it just because we're all set up now
oh,
for
I
software
think it is to save money, but they're not realizing the true cost.
that it costs them a lot of money to
Well, every 3 years, they have to redesign the interface so that because it's
because the
terrible,
platform
and they
doesn't work anymore. Well,
refactor
yeah,
and
they have a new platform that they're
platform and
running
this
on,
thing. Yeah,
and
so, like, every couple of years, they're spending a tremendous amount of capital redesigning, new features. Okay, we've, like, added 6 other features that have been zombied on, and now we have to,
But you
okay,
might
we're going to
need to do
centralize
that
it.
even
And
if you did, but you
I don't know if it's a knob to turn a thermostat.
you
I,
might not need to, you might still need to change the underlying programming every 3 years, but you wouldn't necessarily, if you have a knob, you don't have to change the interface.
yeah. And to make a good interface is hard. So here's my theory, and you can tell me
Okay.
whether you agree or disagree. And this is
Okay.
why I had that really long preamble.
Okay.
I think there are teams that, physical design teams, and I think they're still okay. I think there are digital design teams that are kind of okay. And the two are just very different. And if you ask them to work together, they can't, because the digital design team has lost the skills for designing in a physical space, for doing user testing of products in a physical space. Like the idea of taking your product and, like for example, there's a UX methodology called a diary study,
Yeah.
in which, people are recording their sort of thoughts, and how the way they're using things sort of throughout the day, or how they interact with it. No one does those. When was the last time in the real world someone was like, let's do a diary study? I
Well, if they
can't
do them,
remember.
they're all they, they just collect the data from the device. They're not, they just see how often did someone
And
log in and how long did they stay on, and
they
they
don't
don't
see,
collect.
like, okay, I get up from my chair,
No,
I
no, no,
walk over, I have
no.
to navigate around,
Well,
I put my
it's
arm up.
interesting that you say this because I had right before we we got on this podcast, I was having a conversation with a client who was telling me about the work he's doing in the help. He had ideas about how I might help with the research. And I said, well, if you really want to know about that, because this particular question he had, I said, really, what you need to do is you can't do an interview. You're going to have to observe them doing it. And he was like, what? I said, you're going to have to observe
Yeah.
them going through the entire process,
Yeah.
and he was like, "Oh, that was like this, oh, observe them using the product,
Product?
like
What?
not interview them on how it went, but
Not
just
just reading the login data from
no, but
the
actually like
from the
observing them as they use the product,
which is
and
exactly, so it's those skills that, like, okay, you were working at Gillette. I am sure that there was a team of people who were just watching guys shave all the time. Like, oh, where do you put the
yeah, I
razor in the
wasn't working in
cabinet?
that
Where do you...
department.
No, I know you weren't working that, but I'm sure that there was someone figuring out, like, they knew every part of the physical process, the way people picked it up, where they stored it, that how they put the little,
Probably.
yeah, so there was a long history and rich culture of observing people in a physical space, and solving those challenges that people had in their actual day-to-day lives. And for example, when you're using a screen, the reality is it's so much more than just the screen, because how you're using it, where it is in a physical space, like, these things are actually all important to your, like if you're using a vending machine that's all digital, like, how you're navigating to it, where you're standing, like, the context of stuff, it's all really important. And all of that other context is just gone now, because people
Well,
only
and
test for on the screen,
I
because
know, and I
it's
think
yeah.
also, about a year ago or so, we did a podcast about I don't know exactly when it was, but we did an episode on how the pandemic had changed user research, and so there is and so even though knock on wood, we're on the other side of the pandemic, there is now, we seem to have gotten stuck in habits uh, of doing, it's like uh, if I talk to clients now about, okay, so let's go make a site visit, it's like, what? we have to go to where they work. And then, I've had people say to me, "Well, I don't know if we can do that because people, you know, they're not working on the job site every day. They do some of the stuff, they're still working at home, or they're not used to interacting with people anymore." So the idea that maybe we could show up, and you mentioned the diary study, a really powerful research technique that I haven't heard anyone talk about in a really long time is a day in the life study. Do you know about
Yeah.
those?
Yeah, sure.
Where you just go watch somebody the whole day or 2 or 3 days as they go about their
And
work.
I should say that
And
there are some people who come from more of an anthropology
yes,
background. Like, some of this stuff is still happening, but it's very rarely done
it
in corporate
is much
settings.
less. It used to be
Very
pretty
rare.
common. If you
Yeah.
were doing
There's academic research with
No,
that
but
kind of stuff.
if you were a UX practitioner, it
Yeah.
was very common
And
that you
I can't think of any of our clients
even if you
that are
weren't
doing
doing
that.
research, if you were doing design,
Yeah.
the first thing you do was go observe the people for either how they use the current product, or even if there wasn't a current product, you just go observe them. This was,
Jotting in
you
notebooks.
do a little bit of an interview, and then you would do some observation of the. You'd at least go visit the site and see where they had the post-it notes. That's I'm sure some people are doing that, but I think it's much, much less.
So,
Yeah.
this is so my I find it interesting because um I am younger than you, and I
Are
have
you?
probably more friends that are younger than you are.
Probably.
And there is a need to do some, for most people my age, to do something in a physical space. There seems to be a premium on things that happen in a physical space. Now, that's not to say a lot of people don't spend a lot of time in digital spaces, but if you look at people's hobbies, a lot of them involve something physical, remodeling a house, playing tabletop board games, working on, painting, pottery. Like, most people my age who do art as a hobby, not as a career, but as a just I just do this for fun on the
For
weekends.
fun, yeah.
It's almost always a physical medium. Sewing,
Okay.
crocheting, painting, you
So are you
know,
saying they are that people in their spare time want to go do physical things?
at least a little bit. They're hiking, yeah, there's something, even though people are spending more time in digital spaces probably than ever before, and certainly more
Yeah.
time working in physical spaces than ever
Yeah.
before. There's still a market, a premium, a strong demand for things that are happening in a physical space, I think.
Yeah.
But and most of our, chores in life are physical spaces,
Yeah.
dishes and cooking and, cleaning out the gutters, or, whatever the thing. So there's a lot that we still have to do in a physical space. And
Mhm.
I worry that because digital design and digital products have been the sexy products for, I mean, even if maybe before the tech boom people were doing database stuff or digital design. I feel like it wasn't until um, the 90s, and then sort of the tech bubble, when it was the digital products that were the cool, sexy products, and the physical products were the boring, old,
Mm.
antiquated
Mhm.
products.
Mhm.
And that, in the United States, that I think was sort of doubly compounded by the fact that, right at that time period, you also had tons of outsourcing of creation of products to China and other sort of, re- other places in the world. So like a chair, a couch, that's not going to be made in America. That's made in some factory in China, and that's not like a couch. Like, it's not like designing a couch for most people. I know there are designer couches and fabric, whatever. But for most people, they just go on Wayfair.com and buy a couch that was made in China, designed by someone. But the cool, hot, trendy IPOs, there weren't any, like IPOs of like it's the hot new company and they design couches.
Yeah.
It was always all the hot new companies, most of them tech,
Right.
screens, tech, computers.
Yep.
So it's been that way for so long that I wonder if there there are people who can still who can do or have the skills who can do really cool innovative design for the physical space, and so they can help bridge that gap between doing good digital design and good physical design. Because I don't know, have you if you've ever used a product recently that actually does a really good job with digital design in a physical space, it's really, really cool. Um, and there are a couple Kickstarter examples where there's like a piece of wood that sort of displays things in waves, and you interact with the wood and move it around, and
Right.
like when it's done well, it's really, really cool. But I worry that the field can no longer do those things well. That those skills are gone. We took them for granted, and that's why all the digital design in physical space is terrible. Is because the people and the skills and the teams and the knowledge to do design in a physical space doesn't exist anymore.
Now I'm sad.
Well, think of it as an opportunity.
What do we do?
Well, there has to
It's
be money in it.
it's interesting.
Has to be sexy again, and the
When
like
I
buttons in cars, maybe it will.
when I was teaching, when I was teaching at University of Wisconsin, and I would teach one of the courses I taught was a UX methods course, which might sound boring to some, but and we did there were these modules. So we would do a user centered design module, we would do an agile module, we would do design thinking module, and we did a lean module. Okay. So the user centered design and the lean, I tended to use digital products as the case study. But for the agile and the design thinking, I used physical products. So they
Mm.
had a design a physical product for those two modules. And um, so we were covering some of the physical product design type work, right? Which for the students, and these were undergraduates in computer science, it kind of UX computer science degree, and they were not used to designing physical products. Like they were like, "You want us to design what?" And they got to make up their own. Well, in for the agile, I gave them a case study. Do you remember that one? I think you helped me with that one.
Oh, I
They had a
y-
design. What was the name of the thing? A tray, the the slingshot, the big
oh, trebuchet.
trebuchet.
Yes, the superior French siege weapon.
Yeah, it was from France from the what,
Yes, it's
1500s or
it's
something.
much better than the catapult.
Yeah, like a catapult, but anyway, that's what we had them design.
Trebuchet.
They loved that project, and then for the design thinking, they got to decide on a physical product to design. But anyway, so they enjoyed the physical product design, but it was totally new to them.
You
The
can
idea
throw
that
a
you would design a physical product,
30
you'd follow a
kilogram
process,
weight,
you'd do
300
it as a
meters.
team, all the. So I understand what you're saying. And I think you've got, there it's probably a generational thing where the people who were trained in physical design and did it for many years are probably retired or close to retiring, and I don't know. And I, like I said, there are places you can still learn this, and I'm sure that there's still people doing it, but it's probably a pretty small number
Yeah.
of people that are
And
trained in that.
and I think you are what you eat, back when you were starting out with companies who had designers who had never designed for a digital space ever,
Yeah.
and then they made a piece of software. I mean, there's some of those pieces, the websites in the 90s and the 2000s that were garbage because they had no idea what they were doing
Yeah, they didn't have a
whatsoever,
design background.
even just the most basic understanding. And you have designers who, when it comes to designing in physical space, have no idea what they're
Right.
doing at
They
all.
would not know how to do
None.
it.
None. And what's really interesting is I feel most of the industrial most again, yeah, it's mostly in the industrial design space. It's like
Yeah.
engineers, people who are 3D printing things, kind of that sort of, they're coming from that
Yeah.
sort of nerdy side, not coming from the, I mean, not to say that there aren't UXers who are 3D printing things, but it's much more common for a lot of UXers to come from the more visually creative side, from the arts, from graphic design, um, maybe programming as well, but uh, it's probably not, you know, soldering motherboards together, and making, robotics or something. Um, so
It
yeah,
really is, it's really quite separated. I was just looking this morning at a training curriculum on digital design.
yeah,
And it was this course on digital design, and I was looking through it, and I was thinking to myself, actually, and I didn't know that you were going to pick this topic, but I was thinking, so just happenstance that I was doing this morning, but I was thinking to myself, how what do they think digital design is? What's in this course? Like, what do they think is important? And it was like, okay, that's missing huge. That's missing huge chunks of knowledge
yeah.
because there really wasn't anything about humans or how they think, or it was like this narrow field, had some visual design in it, had a few UX principles, not really well described. And so, it was like, oh, and this was I think a well-known person, and so you're right. I think this
Well, regardless of
digital
the
design.
training,
Pardon?
let's just forget the academic training.
Yeah.
I went to law school, and the lots of stuff they didn't teach me. That's
Yeah.
okay. But teams that are working on stuff in
Yeah,
companies are just missing out on all these
they
opportunities
are.
because they're not thinking of things in a physical way. So I'll give you an
Physical way.
example. Okay, we have a microphone. I'm using
We
a new
do.
microphone.
Yeah.
Um, Not this mic, because this is why I bought this mic,
Yeah.
but there are other brands of mics that come with software. So there's the microphone, which is a physical thing, and there's like a software suite where you can change levels and do this
Yeah.
stuff. They're almost all terrible. Almost
Yeah.
all of them are,
The interfaces, you mean?
they're buggy. You got to log
Yeah.
in or
Yeah, yeah,
something, and then
yeah.
the device isn't found, and
Right, right,
now
right.
it's the wrong output, and it's complicated. Blah blah. So there again, another more physical products that just they can't. The digital design's fine, the physical product's fine, and they just can't mesh together.
Can't bring it together.
But if you're only thinking in one dimension, physical or digital, you're missing out on some really cool synergies. So, for example, imagine a microphone design that has a software suite that actually works, and the software suite would tell you, so you talk and the software suite tells you exactly where to position the mic. Hey,
Yeah.
you need it 2
Yeah,
inches closer
bring
to
it
your face.
closer, lift
Move
it
it
up.
away.
Right.
Like in this particular situation, you're too close, or if you want to be this close, turn the bass down. Like, there are really cool
Yeah.
interactions that you could do that actually would help the user. Like, what's
Really
the
help.
biggest problem when you're using a new microphone?
Yep.
The levels are wrong. It's too loud or it's too soft. You're too close or you're too far away. And that's a design challenge if that you can only solve if you have experience in digital and physical
Yeah,
design.
interesting.
And it's just all these opportunities that
I mean,
happen, even with products that are
video recording,
webcams, right? Webcams, yeah.
webcams, really another one. I mean, another whole area that you and I both work in, or not work in, but play in, is the whole music recording, and which involves microphones and software and
Think of a monitor. So a monitor, one of the most digital devices really that you can have, because I mean it is a physical product, but all it's doing is it's just showing digital stuff.
yeah,
You know, why does every monitor not come with a light sensor and a simple button where you can adjust so
yeah,
that when it's really bright outside, it brightens the screen by whatever,
yeah,
low,
yeah,
medium,
yeah.
or
It knows
high.
what to do.
And if it's really dark, like at night, my eyes are not glazed by like the light of
Yeah,
the sun, just like
I know.
searing me.
Oh, speaking of which, could we please have a laptop screen that I can use outside in the summer? Could we please?
Oh, hey, in fairness, if they exist and they're called,
Not on my
unfortunately,
laptop.
they're called MacBooks Pros.
Is that true?
The MacBook Pros are pretty good out in
All
the
right. Well,
anyone who's
then
got
after
a new Mac
offline,
Pro,
you and I are
MacBook
going to
Pro
have to
can.
talk about getting me a new laptop because I
In
want to sit
fairness,
outside in the summer.
so this is a very nerdy conversation. Your laptop screen probably tops out at 300, maybe 350 nits of brightness.
Yeah, I have no idea what you're
And you
talking
and
about.
in the sun you need 400, 450, 500 would be better in sunlight to see the screen. And depending on if you're watching HDR content or something,
All right,
really, like a
we're
cell
gonna have
phone,
this
like a new cell
conversation
phone can go up to
offline.
1,000, just a little bit, but it's much smaller screen. Anyways,
Yeah. Okay.
so yes, so I worry, that we are in for a future of really terrible physical
Oh,
design,
you're making me really sad, Guthrie.
unless
Yeah.
there is a market for good physical design where
Well, all
stuff
right.
just.
So
Now here's the good news.
what?
People seem to really, really like well designed physical products
Yeah.
and are willing to pay a premium.
Right. And because that's that.
Apple owns the market because that is what they're good at, is digital and physical design together in a device. Sony, I have these really nice pair of Sony wireless headphones. They're really well designed. The physical design on them is great, like paired with like the software. The software's not great, but the software on the actual devices is good. Like if I want to pause things, it's like a little double tap on the side
Yeah.
and it pauses. Always. It just always works. It's fantastic. So that's an expensive product, but I think people are willing to pay a premium for well-designed physical products, and I think companies are starting to figure this out,
Mm,
especially with some of the AR, augmented reality stuff that they want to implement.
mhm.
Like these are just things that you're going to have to figure out. Um, so yeah, I'm not sure I did a great job succinctly describing all of my thoughts, but they
You
are
got there.
complicated.
You got there. You're all
Like,
right.
I got,
You got there.
it's like yeah, Rogers and Ebert, two thumbs up. You got there in the end.
Hey, so this it's an interesting topic. I appreciate you bringing it up, and I guess we have to look
Just
to the
long-winded.
expensive luxury markets to move us forward, and then maybe it'll trickle down from there. I don't know. It's a really good point.
The only other success is like when people actually spend money, and it's really important that it work. There are successes.
Yeah.
So the second one is going to be the USB-C cable.
Okay.
where they really, because they had the USB A, is that like what side is it, and you
Yeah,
can
yeah,
never get
yeah,
it to
yeah,
plug
yeah.
in. And they're like, okay, let's just reinvent this physical connector for a digital
Yeah, and
product.
make life
And
easier.
they nailed it, like you just
Yeah,
does it, it's omnidirectional, you just plug it in, it works. Of course, that's not really digital, that's just really, really good industrial design,
right, right.
so um oh, hey, look at this, someone says that my examples were good, so there
Yay.
we go. Fantastic.
All right. Well,
Okay.
Guthrie, thank you so much for this conversation.
Yes, yes, thanks for having it. um we were on a bit of a break. I think next week we will also be off recording, I think. But otherwise, other than that,
We
we'll
should be
continue.
back on.
Yeah, we'll continue to record regularly,
Yeah.
and we hope to hear from you, and I will talk to you soon. All right.
Thanks, Guthrie. Bye
Have a
bye.
great rest of your day. Bye.